if you haven't already, we'd love for everyone to take a seat. This is military. We want to begin timely. Mr. Adam Keith. So good evening. We'd like to welcome you to our second annual Restoring Freedom Dinner, tonight proudly presented by our platinum sponsors, the McGinnis Team, Chambliss Law, and Restore Roofing. I'm Diane McDermott, and many of you may have heard, seen, or know my name from multiple voicemails, texts, possum cards, or grateful monthly emails. It is my honor to be the development director for this meaningful ministry, Warrior Freedom Service Dogs. I would like to warmly welcome each and every one of you here tonight. There are so many individuals in this room that deserve to be acknowledged and thanked, but truly we'd be here all evening. So mainly I want to thank God for each and every one of you that you've put your busy lives aside to be here 100% present with us tonight by design. So we'd like to welcome you as our Warrior Freedom family. I'm a little nervous, sorry. We all wear many caps in our lives, and one of my most proud is as the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Jack McDermott, USMC retired, who unfortunately last minute could not be here with us this evening. But it is a very special night and day in that it is the Marine Corps birthday, 247th Marine Corps birthday. Hoorah, yes. So on this eve of Veterans Day, I'd like to add a special welcome to all of our valued veterans in the room, and a very special happy birthday to all of our present U.S. Marines and my papa. So this evening does come with a warning. Every time you stand, your seat will return to the upright position. I used to be a flight attendant, can you tell? And I'll show you your exit as well. But please sit and stand very carefully. Seriously, there was some episodes last year, so we just really want to caution you. And it is a rare opportunity that we get to share part of the village that makes up the behind the scenes of our Warrior Freedom family. So it is my honor to introduce Miss Ella Keith, a proud daughter of a very important father, who is our founder and volunteer executive director, Adam Keith. Her support and strength has been a blessing to all of us. So following the Pledge of Allegiance, she will be giving us the blessing of the evening. And it is also my honor to introduce Leah Domino, a dedicated daughter, working mother, wife, sister, mentor, my friend, but most inspirationally to me, an Air Force medic combat veteran who met her Army medic combat veteran husband, Dom, in Afghanistan. Together, they overcame their military branches to lovingly create two small branches of their family, Dom and Tucker. Leah is our volunteer coordinator, and together with her family has pledged an allegiance to be an integral part of the behind the scenes of this Warrior Freedom family. So now I welcome Leah Domino.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you so much. I feel super grateful to even have a small part in this amazing organization. If you all will please rise from your seats and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can be seated.
Carefully.
Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for everyone that came tonight, and thank you for all these veterans, and thank you for Group 8 veterans that are coming up and graduating. Thank you for everything that you've blessed us with this past year and Warrior Freedom, and thank you for everything that you've given us, and thank you, and I hope that you bless us and bless this food. In your name, amen.
Just throughout the world. The Desert Storm in 1991.
found new purpose in becoming a policeman. I found that if I had a mission or something that I was working toward, keeping my mind focused, that I wasn't having any problems. I like to equate it to you take all those issues from combat, all those issues from police work, and you put them in a little box, and then you put it way back in the closet. You hide it back there, and you lock that closet, and you don't visit it that often. When I retired, those dragons came out.
Yeah, I was home for my training for like a month when we got called up to go to Desert Storm. We left on my birthday, my 19th birthday. I started out in corrections. I worked at Silverdale for a year, then I worked for the state at the Chattanooga Community Correction Center. And then I went to the Chattanooga Police Department and retired from there. Like most of the guys, like I didn't realize something was wrong. I just thought I was, for lack of a better term, a butthole. And I do have PTSD, some from the military, and I have some from the police department because there are things that I seen stuff there that contributed.
My wife was noticing my behavior was not normal, that I was overly anxious about things, that I was constantly on alert. My anger problems were getting out of hand. She just couldn't put her hands on it, and finally she told me that I need to go to the VA. At that point, the VA diagnosed me with severe PTSD, also with depressive and anxiety disorder.
I started to become a recluse. I didn't want anything to do with anybody. It was hard for me to go out and just have a dinner or go shopping with my wife. My wife and I both came to the conclusion that one day I just walked up to her and said, "Okay, I've got PTSD." For most people in the military or after the military, saying that you have PTSD is like saying you have a disease.
I'm on medication. Medication only helps us so much. I still felt like I was having problems with anger, even though I was medicated beyond belief. I still had problems with anxiety, even though I was medicated beyond belief.
Honestly, I found a lot of stuff like when I finally realized I needed help, I wasn't about to turn anything down that I could try.
My wife and my mother-in-law had seen the flyers for Warrior Freedom Dogs. It took me a year and a half to be exact. And one day I went to Ace Hardware and I picked up their flyer and I read it. And I broke down and started crying.
And I was like, when I come out here, they had a waiting list. I think I was on the waiting list for like 6 months. And I was like, look, I'm in a bad place. Can I just come out there now? I mean, you don't have to give me a dog right now, but if I can come out, feed the dogs, play with the dogs, whatever.
When I came down here for my first visit, that's when I really kind of knew that this was a place that could help me. And then when going through the classes with Tank here, it really helped me to feel more like a member of society again at some point.
I did my kennel week, and this guy right here, Charlie, he came out of the kennel, walked up to me, and leaned into me and looked up at me like he was saying, "Hey, I'm yours. I'm going to take care of you." And him and I have bonded ever since.
Then when going through the classes with Tank here, it really helped me to feel more like a member of society again at some point.
I mean, we have a guy that was able to reduce his psych medications quite a bit due to his dog.
I don't even like to call him my service dog. I like to call him my companion. He provides my security. I can go in public now. I can go places. He alerts me when my anxiety starts to rise.
He's always with me, no matter what, and it's always been like that since the first day that we met.
My daughter told me that she felt like she got her dad back?
I have the confidence to join my family at outings. I have the confidence to walk into Walmart to make a purchase. I have the confidence to be in public because I know that if my anxiety rises, if I start to have an issue, this guy's going to identify it long before I do.
I feel like I've got more of a time to just be. I can be me now. I feel more whole again.
It really amazes me, like everything they do with the dog, like when they give you the dog, everything has been paid for. And while you get through, like the only thing I paid for was the background check. Everything else was provided from donations to this organization. And if you look at all the time, because we get them about a year and a half, so you got all the time that is invested in these dogs, all the training that's invested in these dogs, all the food, the care. I mean, what they do with these dogs isn't cheap, and the fact that they can do it and they raise enough money to where it costs the veteran very little till they graduate is amazing to me.
I would encourage anybody and everybody that this organization is by far one of the most heartwarming, one of the most concerned about veterans that I have come across.
There is no bigger need. There's no bigger thing that you can do with the sport because it helps every veteran to be able to kind of come back and connect to this world more than you could ever imagine. It gives us a sense of feeling of needs, of wants, of connections, of everything that there is possible.
So I've got my notes in my hand, right? Is that what everybody else does, is puts it on their phone? I'm hoping none of my buddies call me right now. So my name is Adam Keith, and I am the co-founder and the executive director of Warrior Freedom Service Dogs. And when I say I'm honored and I'm humbled that you're actually sitting here, I mean that. I know that's a formality at places you go to, but I mean I am humbled and honored that you are here right now because I can probably wire up your light switch, but I'm not the guy who thought I would be standing here doing this, okay? So I thank you. I hope the food was great. I know the people that have cooked it, served it, made this whole thing happen here are an A+++. If you want to give them a round of applause. I want to start us off really quick just saying thank you. Number one, I want to say thank you to this church. Calvary Chapel offered us this venue and to do this for us last year, and many of you were here, and I was floored at the offer. I was triple floored when I walked in and saw the results of this room last year and then again this year, and it's all thanks to the ladies in the black shirts that say Warrior Freedom on most of them. Yeah? And if you see one in particular chasing the rest, her name's Peggy, and she makes it all come together too, right there. So thank you to Calvary Chapel, and thank you to the Renew Ministry, which is very powerful in this town. And I've got to see it firsthand, and I've been floored by just their work and how God's at work through it in this community. A few other things real quick is, I want to say, obviously, thank you to our main platinum sponsors tonight. Sitting right here, we have Restore Roofing, the McGinnis team, and Chambliss Law Firm. And again, I'm humbled that you would sponsor and be here with us tonight. And I'm very proud of what we do. So I think you're wise to be that for this mission because you see the impact. But I'm very thankful that you all make this happen. Do we have any, our volunteers on Warrior Freedom's team, Raise your hand. Anyone? Who's our team? Who's on the Warrior Freedom team right now? Oh, we've got a lot of hands right here. So I'd say 90% of our team are volunteers, and that's what made all this happen. So I want to say thank you to them too for putting this together, because as you know or may not know, it takes a lot of months in the works to put all these things together. I want to say another special thank you. I realized after last year's dinner I did not say this, and I regretted it on my own. I didn't get any flack for it, because that's not who she is. But I have a very, no offense to you tough veterans here, but I have one of the toughest people in the room, happens to be my wife. She has put up with a lot with me. She's dealt with a lot of illness over the last several years. And she also welcomed this whole mission to operate at our home, in our home. So my wife and kids, Alicia, Luke, and Ella, have been amazing to share this whole mission with all the veterans and all the other volunteers and the team that are amazing that come in. And so thank you. Yeah. Now, this is the only part I've really been nervous about. Since I'm a civilian, properly introducing men who have earned the title, because General Joe, as he's going to refer to himself, says just call me General Joe. He's an awesome man. I've only known him for a few months now, but for his generosity to come down here and speak tonight from Fort Payne, I was floored that he would be willing to do that. So if you would, please help me welcome retired Lieutenant General. That's a 3-star, by the way, if you're like me and don't know those things. U.S. Army, Joe Cosumano.
Dog tags. Dog tags. Veterans, stand up. Veterans. If you're a veteran, stand up. Or if you're on active duty, give them a round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you. On the dog tags, it's Joseph M. Cosumano Jr. He's got my social security number. It says B negative, my blood type in case I need to be saved in combat. And then it's got my religion, which is Catholic, which means I'm Joe Cosumano. I'm first a Christian. I have been saved for life. And secondly, I am a soldier for life. Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure for me to be here tonight. Absolute pleasure. When Eric Dudash, who was here last year as a speaker, asked me to speak and I met Adam, I said, of course, I'll be here, of course. I'm 76 years old and I'm glad to be any place, as a matter of fact. But to be among this group tonight who support our veterans in such a unique way, it is a real pleasure. I've had the great pleasure of serving almost 36 years continuous of active duty, and I've met some tremendous soldiers. And I want to share a little bit of my experience with you tonight, and a couple of stories about some heroes that I met along the way. And speaking of heroes, let's have another round of applause for the Warrior Freedom Dogs Foundation. What a unique group. I was out at Adam and Alicia's house maybe about a month and a half ago, and I was surprised that all the training is at their home. And I said, well, you've got a nice barn here, but where do you go to the restroom? I'm an Army guy, of course, but I have a Marine Corps son-in-law who is here. Gunnery Sergeant Dayton McConnell over here. Raise your hand, Gunnery Sergeant. He's on active duty, Camp Lejeune. And so I said, where's the restroom? Because I'm an Army guy. And they said, in the house. So this is a family business. The men who train and women who train, they train on their property and they use their house. So thank you very much, Adam and Alicia and family and staff, for all that you do for our veterans. I've served with some furry friends myself in various combat zones. Simply amazing, saving lives in that capacity. And just a small bit of trivia, when I was reading about service dogs, the first monument to a service dog was the Marine Corps erected that monument after World War II in Guam. And they used Doberman Pinscher dogs, and they were called the devil dogs. I was trying to decide what I would speak to you about tonight, so I asked Diane McDermott, well, how long do I have? She says, you're a general, you can take as long as you want. And I said, no, how long? 10 or 15 minutes, General Joe, that's all you got. So look, tomorrow's a special day, isn't it? It's an absolutely special day. And I want to talk about veterans. And I want to talk about veterans in a couple of ways. Over the years, I have been haunted by two questions. And many of the people that I have met, served with along the way, have been haunted by these same two questions that I will answer for you tonight, at least in my humble opinion, and in others' humble opinion. And that is, why serve? And was it worth it? So let me take the first one. And why serve? Soldiers of the great republic that we live in have been willing to fight for their individual God-given rights, even among each other in the Civil War and other wars in faraway lands. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, you name it. The global war on terrorism that still goes on today. The global war on terrorism. Everyone knows when an American soldier deploys, it strikes fear in the hearts of our enemies. Toby Keith said it best in his song, and I quote, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. He's got a line that says, hey, Uncle Sam, he put your name at the top of the list, and the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist. And the eagle will fly, man. It's gonna be hell when you hear Mother Freedom start ringing her bell. Wow. Fear is in the faces of our enemies when the American soldier, when I say the American soldier, I mean all services. Look across America in town squares. There's a scene repeated thousands of times in memory of blank county, DeKalb County, Dade County, whatever state and whatever county. Here lives liberty, justice, and democracy, and it survives because of these veterans. On those stones are the names of the soldiers who participated in those wars throughout the years. Over 41 million American soldiers have fought for our country and for other people's countries. And over 1 million have died. So why serve? That common denominator. Why serve? It's for freedom. It's as simple as that. It is for freedom. Why serve? When then Governor Reagan was speaking to then POW John McCain in 1974, I know it's probably before many of you were born, who had just been released from 6 years of POW. The future president of the United States posed a question. He was then the governor, of course, of California. Where do we find such men? And he was talking about John McCain. He was speaking of our veterans, past and present. Well, he said, we find them in our streets, in our offices, in our shops, and on our farms. in Flintstone, Rising Fawn, Fort Payne, where I'm from, Chattanooga, and on and on. So why serve? It really is about freedom. This brings me to the second questions that veterans and, yes, families ask themselves about service. Was it worth it? Well, the global war on terrorism began at 9/11, didn't it, in 2001. And now we have veterans who were just born in those years, who are now veterans of their particular service. I was on active duty at that time. I was the commander of Space and Missile Defense Command, a 3-star position headquartered in Washington, D.C. My job was the ground air defense commander, essentially for the Army, and also space at the same time. You are having a bad day when you're the ground defense commander for Washington, D.C., and the Pentagon's attacked, and the Twin Towers are attacked. And also, obviously, an airplane was down in Pennsylvania. 9/11 began what was the longest war in our nation's history, and that's Afghanistan. Those of you who served in the Vietnam War, it was 19 years and 5 months officially. The war in Afghanistan was 19 years and 9 months, the longest war in history. But these are the statistics that really stood out. In 1 hour, at 9/11, in 1 hour, 3,000 Americans lost their life. 10,000 children became orphans in 1 hour on that day. 1 hour. Their mother and father were killed, or they lost their supporting parent in that 1 hour. More people were killed in that day, to include things like Pearl Harbor, who you read about a lot. Our freedom was at stake, and although we have officially ended hostilities in Afghanistan and Iraq, we still have the global war on terrorism that's executed in other places like Syria and Libya and other areas in the Middle East. There are so many stories about the global war on terrorism, and I wanted to share just a couple of them with you. It's January the 22nd, 2006, in Taji, Iraq. Air Force Sergeant Brian McElroy and Tech Sergeant Jason Norton were MPs on patrol when their vehicle was struck by an IED. An IED is an improvised explosive device. It's some type of explosion that's planted in the ground and your vehicle runs over it. They were two best friends, even before active duty and on active duty. They share the same coffin at Arlington because the remains were so intermingled by the blast and fire, they were not identifiable. Brian's mother gave him a gold cross and told him, never lose it. They found that gold cross. Jason's wife said that he was the best father in the world. Was it worth it? Brigadier General retired Bob Woods is over here at the table. Bobby, raise your hand. Lieutenant Bobby Woods, United States Army, was leading his unit, General Woods' son, when he was shot in the head by a sniper, August 2010, near Kandahar, Afghanistan. He survived, and after months of recovery, still lives today, but the scars are there. Was it worth it? My son-in-law over here, Dayton McConnell, who I introduced earlier, was fighting with Marines in the Helmand province in Afghanistan as well. And he received the Bronze Star with V for valor. During that period of time, he lost a number of friends. In Dayton, I didn't clear this with him. He's a real modest guy. But when I first met Dayton, he had names tattooed on him. And I said, why would you tattoo people's names on your body, Dayton? They don't come off. Was it worth it? Well, 20 veterans commit suicide each day. Over 50,000 veterans are homeless, ladies and gentlemen. 1 out of 5 suffer from PTSD, which we're here to talk about tonight. And the question remains, was it worth it? I think an answer by retired General John Kelly, Marine Corps, may at least give one of the best answers I've heard. He himself was a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan and was asked by National Public Radio about the loss of his son in the Helmand province in 2010. And he was asked by the interviewer, was it worth it? And he said, I quote, the only person who really has the right answer is the person who lost their lives. He said they were doing what they wanted to do and where they wanted to be. I think it is not for us to answer that question. It's for those young people who serve to answer that question. And they do answer it with their action and their lives. Look around, ladies and gentlemen. We're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in a beautiful location. Family, friends, your country. Do you think it's worth it? For me, I agonize about the 10 years I spent away from home. And I say for myself and for my family, for it's not what I missed or what I lost. It's really what I have. And it's worth it. Look across the table. You would do what any one of these people I said tonight would do. We've got to continue to honor our veterans and their families because the history of America is written in the blood of our veterans. And I want to close this fairly lengthy talk with a quote by George Washington in 1798, because it is really significant. Do I have some Vietnam War veterans in here? Raise your hand, Vietnam War veterans. Who up? They didn't get the welcome home. They got no welcome home. George Washington said in 1798, the willingness with which our young people will fight in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional as to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and how they are appreciated by their country. So there's 2 questions. Why serve? Freedom. Was it worth it? Yes, for each other. Ladies and gentlemen, if you see a veteran tomorrow, shake their hand. You know, you see the guy at Lowe's with his hat on, you know, kind of stumbling around, maybe 76 years old like I am. Shake his hand, you know, offer him a cup of coffee. He'll probably turn you down, but he'll appreciate it anyway. Let me close by saying God bless those of you who have served. God bless the families who have supported them and waited for them. God bless foundations like the Warrior Freedom Dogs, and God bless America, the wonderful place we live in. Y'all have a great night. Thank you very much.
Not too shabby, huh? So I have to admit, I'm a little awestruck. I'm a few years now, 8 years I've been around the veterans we've been working with, and so I'm kind of used to that. But when I start meeting generals, it's a little different. So not sure what to say. My mouth dries up, and I'm like, yes, sir. What do I do? What do I do? So, General Joe, thank you so much for being here, and your whole team. Thank you all for being here and driving all the way up and making the sacrifices you have for this country. Now, it's another honor to introduce one more person here. And Wayne, as I've met veterans, I get to know a few at a time, and this is a hard thing we do. We ask the veterans who graduate to come back in the program and be a mentor, and it takes a toll. There's a lot of commitment there. There's a lot of time commitment. You're working with someone who just had their life changed with a dog already, so now you're asking them to come back and give and be generous with their time as well for the next veterans. I get to know a few as we go, and lately, this gentleman graduated back in the spring, and ever since then, one day he called me and said, hey, come by the house. He lives near where we operate in Flintstone, and I went by his house, and he wanted to talk to me, and I thought I was in trouble, and I didn't know what to say, so I said, yes, sir, and I came by, and we sit down on the couch, and he looked at me, and with emotion in his eyes, I could tell he was serious about something. I thought he was going to tell me something horrible was going on. But he said, for the time I have left in my life, I want to help you give away what you've given me. And I want to serve this organization. And then I got emotional. What do you say to that? So, because I could talk to you until the cows come home, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to introduce retired Sergeant Major, U.S. Army, Wayne Haines, and his service dog, Charlie.
He asked, how is it that I can come out here and have PTSD and talk to people? And I said, well, it's real easy. Say, I was a sergeant major. Well, when I get in front of a group, it's like a formation. I've got control of it, and we'll take it from there. The first thing I want to do is say, go Devil Dogs, 247 years, hoo-ah! I want to take us back a little bit. Several years ago, a young businessman met a veteran. He befriended him, and that veteran was in need. Come on. He was in need. It became evident to this businessman that he needed to do something. He opened his heart. He was training bird dogs. Why couldn't he train a dog for this veteran? What happened next? He trained that dog. He trained the dog for that veteran, and he saw what that dog could do. The veteran got better. And this young businessman went, wait a minute. If I can do that with this dog, what if I could do that even more? He became entrenched in trying to help veterans. He built an organization. He asked for volunteers. He asked for help from businesses, and you all responded. from the businesses providing them money to the volunteers that came out to from foster parents. You think of something simple as a foster parent. Hey, try raising one of these for a year in your house, and then you have to give it up. That's heart. Charlie's saying thank you. So, the people in admin, the behind the scenes that keep this thing rolling, it has been more than a blessing, and it all started with a vision to help veterans. I'd like to leave you with a couple facts. One, right now they say 22 veterans commit suicide a day. VA came out with a new figure because they weren't counting certain aspects that are actually suicide, like drug overdoses. The number they say now is actually 44 veterans a day commit suicide. What an amazing number. And why? They feel lost. After combat, after years of service, of seeing things that are so unimaginable, and they come back and they're in the civilian sector, and those, what I call dragons, start to appear. And what do? Generally, like I did, after I retired, I became a recluse. I didn't want to have anything to do with anybody, and I didn't want to share what it was I was feeling. It affected my family. It affected everybody around me. But primarily, it was me internalizing everything. Well, my mother-in-law and my wife kept encouraging me. Hey, there's this organization called, Warrior Freedom Dogs, right down the street, less than a mile away from you. Maybe you want to check that out. We think a dog would do you good. Yeah. I went and picked up their flyer one day. I made sure that mother-in-law and wife were gone, because I didn't want to admit, that maybe they were right or anything. But I went ahead and secretly picked up that flyer. I went back to the house and I sat in the garage and I started reading what it was these dogs do for veterans and for PTSD. And I'm going to tell you right now, I broke down. I started crying in that garage. I started crying. And I picked up the phone and I called and I said, how do I apply? Well, they immediately got me in. I graduated in group 7. This is my companion. What he does for me is absolutely amazing. He alerts when I'm having issues. He wakes me up from nightmares. And he's always around. I can't even go to the bathroom without him being there. Now, I will say there's one thing that irritates me. He will not let me sleep in. He has to wake me up between 8 and 9 o'clock every morning. And if I don't get up, those big paws are pounding on my head and he's barking in my ear. Well, once I get up and get my first cup of coffee, he goes to sleep. Charlie has meant more for me and my family than I can ever, ever, ever repay. I've committed, and I've told Adam this, that I want to repay and I want to pay it forward. So doing events like this or whatever else it takes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be there. Me and Charlie. Because your involvement in this organization is absolutely necessary. Without it, the organization doesn't exist. But what it does for veterans, the vision that Adam had for veterans, is godly. Okay? I'd like to invite my wife to come up here for a minute. A lot of times you hear things from the veteran's standpoint. I think it's important to hear it from the standpoint of a spouse, a family member who's lived it. You have to give her a little bit of time. She's slow coming up the stairs. Hang on.
First of all, I'm sorry that there is mascara dripping everywhere because they already made me cry.
Go right over here.
This organization has changed our lives. Wayne and I were almost on the midst of a divorce 2 years ago. He had quit going to events. I couldn't get him out of bed. He slept 12 and 14 hours a day. The depression was eating him alive. And it took a toll on our marriage. I knew, we've been married 20 years. I knew when we first started dating he didn't really like to go out in public that much, but hey, who really does like to go out in crowds? I discounted it. And for a long time, I made excuses for him. You can't go, I get it. I'll just tell everybody you don't feel like going, or you had to work over, or it was always an excuse. As our final daughter graduated from high school, she said, Mom, you know, he missed a lot of sports groups, a lot of sports. And I said, yeah, he did. But he had to work a lot. That was my excuse. And over time, it was okay to excuse those things away. When he was working, I had an excuse for him. But when he retired, I didn't anymore. And he became withdrawn. I couldn't get him to go anywhere. I couldn't get him out of bed. The depression ate him alive, and we made our first visit to the VA. And I don't even want to talk about the VA, but I will say this. We walked in the door, and the first thing they asked me was, do you want him committed? And if you've never been asked that, you don't know what it does to your soul. And I looked at that lady who was sitting across from me, and I said, I don't want him committed. I want you to find help for him. And she said, well, come on back and we'll give you some medicine. Great. Okay, here we go. They gave him so much medicine that he slept for 24 hours. He got up and took the next dose and slept for 48. I thought, well, we're no better off than when we started. And that's when I began to read about warrior freedom dogs. And I knew that Charlie could change everything. I knew that there was a dog somewhere that could change everything. We continued on with the VA, and he continued with counseling, and our marriage started to respond some. And then he decided he wanted to take the leap for warrior freedom. He said, but I'm too old. They probably won't give me a dog. I said, well, you ain't dead yet, so you still got an option. So I had spent some time with my dad and told him, I said, Dad, I don't know what else to do. And Dad looked at me and said, don't give up. Let go and let God. And that was probably the best advice I've ever had. I went home, and Wayne tells me that he's ready to try this whole warrior freedom thing. That's what he said, warrior freedom thing. After filling out his application and getting the call back, it was like something inside him changed. He had a purpose again. Warrior freedom not only saved Wayne, it saved me, and it saved our marriage. I cannot make a plea big enough. If you have it in your heart to support this organization, please do. They are making changes in lives every day. He is involved with our grandchildren. He showed up at the soccer field by himself the other night, well, with Charlie, but showed up at the soccer field for our granddaughter's game. Not prompted by me, didn't even come with me. He drove in his own car. He is engaging in the community again. And if you've had someone that has dealt with depression, who can't get out of bed or who can't function, then you know exactly what I'm talking about when they come back to life. This is an example of coming back to life. And I cannot thank Adam enough and his family for making the effort. It takes a toll on them every day. And every day they get up and start all over again. So I plead with you, if you can afford to give, please do. You are changing veterans' lives for the better every single day. So thank you, and I'm sorry that I kept you. But you all have a wonderful evening, and thank you.
Kind of nailed it. You kind of nailed it too. Great job. I don't think I have to do anything now, do I? I had to go through all my notes and scratch everything out. They said everything I was going to say. I want to start by just mentioning just the struggle from the veterans, not just from obviously from a veteran standpoint, from a civilian standpoint, but the stories I've seen is what makes me stand up here and want to offer you the opportunity to be part of this mission. I've seen veterans who disassociate. So basically what happens with complex post-traumatic stress and TBI, typically you have the amygdala and the hippocampus that get injured. And those two, mainly the amygdala, controls your long-term memory bank and also controls your fear, the control of your body. So when these things are damaged from combat, the lethal thing can turn your body into this fight or flight mode. And in the worst cases I've seen, it causes disassociation, which means you lock up. I've only seen this on the internet once. I kept meeting veterans and never saw anything like that until one day I did. One veteran I was at his house one night before he started the program. I'd taken a dog down there. And I was sitting in his couch. His family had gone to bed, and all of a sudden he just locked up. He was sitting down, he started stuttering and saying the same thing over and over. I didn't know what to do. So finally I grabbed his hand and just put it on the dog's head, and he came out of it. I have no idea what caused that at that time. Fast forward about 3 months later, this same veteran's at training class at this point in the program. He takes a phone call and walks off and is on the phone, so we kind of continued our class with our other veterans. And next thing you know, one of our mentors came up and said, "Hey, where'd this veteran go? I just saw him on the road down there." I was like, "What?" So I went and grabbed his dog, and I was looking for this guy, and I get down to the road. He's not at the road. I go to the next road. He's not at the next road. I get to the main highway, and he's out on the main highway just hoofing it. He is getting down the road in the ditch, and he is at a pace I can't keep up with. So I drive down to him. I get out. I go up to him, and he's repeating, "I can't save them all. I can't save them all." In this moment, I went back to the truck, got the dog out, ran up to him. I was trying to get his attention. I had my arm around him. I was talking to him. I was standing in front of him. He'd walk around me. He did not change pace. I've never seen anything like that before or after. But finally, not knowing what to do again, I picked this dog up and I put his wet nose in the back of his neck. And he comes back out of it. And he goes to collapse, and so I helped sit him down. I wrapped the long leash around his body. By this point, the neighbors on the main road that I know from the hardware store are coming out saying, "If we're okay, here's this weird two dudes in the ditch. Like, what are they doing?" And it felt a little wrong at the moment, but I knew I had to prove this. So I took out my phone, and I just turned the video on. And I've got that footage I look at sometimes today where he's sitting on the ground, and I go back and get the truck and come up and get him back in the car. His eyes are dilated, and he's holding the dog, and he's just shaking, but he came out of it. Just the other day, I had a veteran I was on the phone with. He said, "Adam, I went to my son's baseball game. I never got a chance to do that. I walked in, and I sat on the front row with a crowd behind me. I've never done that since I got out of the military. And I said, 'What's different?' He goes, I don't know. I just know when that dog's head comes up and he's looking around and seems concerned, then I get concerned. But when he's chill, my whole soul goes chill. And I'm okay with it. I can't explain that. The cool news is, since we started in 2014 when I met Matt, there was no industry at the time that was formalized to help veterans with post-traumatic stress or TBI with service dogs. There were some people out there in the country trying to do this, but none of us knew of each other. Another thing is, at that point, the word PTSD was beginning to get used more. So post-traumatic stress was beginning to get used more, which meant more data was starting to happen at different universities and research was going on. But until then, think about all the wars, the major wars we fought in. Think about, since the beginning of time, how many people have had post-traumatic stress? And the big one to me is that we live in utopia. We live in America where there's not the kind of threats that they face if you're a 4-year-old kid growing up in Iraq. You grow up here typically without a lot of threats. And then you go off to sign up to serve your country, and you go into hell and fight with those people who can't fight for themselves. And you defend the ability for us to sit here and eat and spend time laughing and joking and eating great food in a house of worship. They go and defend all that. And we don't have to think about that. Right now, there's people fighting on our behalf, not just sitting at some post. There's people in harm's way as we speak, and we'll probably never know what's going on, but it's happening for you and I. So as I've gotten to know these veterans and hear their stories, I meet some that have gotten out and they're on every medication that they can get. They're sick of being on the medication. They sleep, like Christine was saying. They feel like they're not themselves. They feel like they don't fit in. And I guess the oddest thing to me in the beginning was I kept thinking, man, I'm missing something here. I'm really missing something. There's not this many people out there needing this much help, and there's nothing going on that's obvious about it. That just don't happen these days. And so a month would click by, 6 months would click by. I keep thinking the same thing. Pretty soon we're 3 or 4 years deep. Now we're 8 years into it. We got 23 graduates. And I am as convinced today as ever before that we have a lot of veterans out there who need help. And where it gets complicated is you have some veterans who are not ready for a service dog. You have some veterans who haven't admitted they're struggling yet because there's a stigmatism attached to it. But post-traumatic stress is not just a stress. It's not just a thing that occurs to you. There's actually a physiological change. And these veterans have this wound that they don't even understand or know about. So right now, imagine it's time to leave. We all go to our car. We take off to head home tonight, and no one's told us they've disconnected the brakes. How does that work? So the part that really pulls my heart out of my chest is when I see the veterans who really have no hope. Matt, the veteran I met in the beginning, he looked at me one day because we would talk about suicide sometimes, and he said, I'm tired. I'm tired of walking to a grocery store and 8 people are there and they're just moving around like normal, and I freak out and I feel like a weirdo, and the endorphins dump in my stomach, and I'm throwing up behind the grocery store. I'm tired of not being able to leave my house. I'm tired of not having friends. And they'll add to all that an injury you don't know about, you don't understand. No one's told you about necessarily. And let's imagine, unless you are military here, you don't know brotherhood. I'm sorry. I've never known brotherhood like I would imagine it would be to have served in combat. Imagine that's taken away from you. And let's also imagine you've gotten home in what you used to have this purpose in your soul for serving this country. Everyone in here is a patriotic American. I know you are, you wouldn't be sitting here. We're all the same. We love our veterans. Today, fortunately, veterans know they're loved by our society. So they can hold their chest out proudly. But they come home, and if I look around the room, unless I know you, I don't know if you served or you didn't, right? So now your purpose has been lost. Where do I fit in? What's wrong with me? Who am I? There's a lot of questions right there that begin to take a person down, and that would happen to any of us. But then you add back on top of that the injury they don't even know about. So 2.5 million veterans are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. I'll guarantee you there's another 800,000 to another million who haven't come forward that they're struggling yet. And we're talking about veterans. We're not talking about first responders. We're not talking about the police department. If you've looked at the TV and the news in the last how many years, the police in our society are not being treated so well. What are they enduring at the same time? So my challenge tonight, my question for you is, I guess I want to challenge you to, one, you've heard the need, you've heard the impact. Before I check, because I'll get home and be like, man, I didn't say this, I didn't say that. Before I go to that part, I want to tell you a little bit about how our program works, because last year I did not do that at all, and I apologize. So what we do is a veteran applies. They have to have been in a theater, a combat theater. They have to have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress or a brain injury. Once we get a chance to meet them at that point, we find out if it's a fit. Can we help this person? Can we provide for them what they need to mitigate this struggle and this disability? And when that's a yes, and once we get to the point of meeting them, usually that's a yes, we actually bring them out to the kennel. And they come out for what's called a kennel engagement. And they spend time coming to the kennel, meeting Miss Julie and the training staff, who does an amazing job. And you want to talk about somebody special. When the pandemic hit, I owned a hardware store. A lot of people went home and couldn't do anything, but the hardware stores were not one of them. All of you people started painting things and doing yard work. So we had just started with a paid staff in 2020, and 2 months later, the world changes. And my job was to go find the funds to do this. And I am not a career nonprofit person. I don't know this world. So the team trucks on, the team carried on through all this. But they would meet with the veterans, they would get to know them, they would find out what kind of dog does this person need. We have one veteran who's retired, his home life is quiet, he has time to spend with that dog, he don't go a lot of places. We have one veteran who's 32, he's got 5 kids under 8. That would give me PTSD. I'm like, brother, put a TV in the bedroom. But that's a whole different atmosphere for that dog to go into, right? So one of the neat things in the beginning was, hey, I was a novice dog trainer, so there's plenty of dogs in the shelters, right? Well, not every dog can do this work. I mean, it takes 24-page assessment and about 3 or 4 hours to decide that, at the least. So we still use rescue dogs for this mission. We also use some breeders that will donate puppies to us because it takes a lot more staff and funds to have a breeding program. They touched on the idea for fosters. That's probably our biggest need right now for volunteers is fosters. We need fosters who are willing to take in a dog, of course, for a long-term stint, 8, 10 months. We also need fosters who will come pick up a trained dog on the weekend. Take home an amazing dog for the weekend just to get the dog out of the kennel, get it around some family, and get it out and about. Because these dogs go through about 1.5 years of training when they're in the kennel. So once we identify the right dog for the right veteran, that's when we let them know it's time to enter the program. So then they come out for a 8-week We went from an 8-month being all volunteers. Once we were able to hire a staff, we did all the training, did all the testing, everything was finished, so when the veteran comes in, there's a trained dog partnered with them, specifically for them. Then we walk with them just like you would teach a kid to ride a bike. We walk with them while we partner, and that bond is built. And that is a tough job. That's a tough job on our team. And I stand up here and say thank you to the team in front of all of you, but there is no amount of thank yous I could ever give for the people on our team and what they've done. And after those 8 weeks and that veteran has bonded, we thought, hey, we're good. Everything's working well with that veteran. Oh, wait. I realized they really didn't understand PTSD, what they're battling. So now we've added in one of our classes. We spend the whole time talking about the brain and what the brain does and how it works and what it controls in your body. I've had multiple veterans come up to me, some emotionally, and say, that was my turning point. I felt validated in that moment. We had a young lady who was she was a medic in Fallujah, in a field hospital. She got out of the service, came home, went to UTC, dropped out as a senior, and finally had to come clean with her family that she was struggling. Well, in the process of trying to figure out what to do about that, she found out about what was then Operation Freedom Dogs and now Warrior Freedom. So she came out to our program, started a program. By the time she was finished, not only was she a changed person, she had already re-engaged at UTC, she finished school, she got accepted to PT school, which is pretty difficult to do. And now, today, she has finished PT school and she's practicing as a physical therapist with her service dog, Millie, right beside her. So I could stand up here all night and go through story after story after story. And I said 23 graduates. That's not 23 veterans we've helped. We've helped a lot more veterans. Some don't always finish. Some get to the finish line and say, the dog just wasn't for me. It's a lot of work. But for me personally as a civilian, to me, the dog is an automatic. The dog has to happen. That's what started this. That's where we're at. That's the need right now. But how do we build a program around these veterans that helps restore that brotherhood that they've lost, that purpose that they've lost? We're trying to do that. Our graduates come back and act as mentors for the upcoming group now. And that's a beginning. But I'll be honest, my ask tonight, number one, is to challenge you as a human being on this earth that's been divinely created by God, who made us to be generous. He gave you and I abundance so that we can give it away and help others. You're not here for your career. You're not here for the things you might think you're here for. You're here to impact the world by loving the person next to you. That might mean your family. That might mean your neighbor or a stranger. But it's our job to be generous tonight. It's our job to be generous every day. And honestly, I would be more proud of each one of you if you walked out of this room and you went and gave somewhere else because this just wasn't your thing, because it's just not some people's thing. But find your thing. This has taught me a ton of generosity in my own life. So I want you to feel that same joy I have felt for these last 8 years. It's not a sacrifice. Trust me, it's not a sacrifice. I know a lot of you already know this because you do support this mission. I'm not going to stand up here tonight and ask you for a certain dollar amount. I'm not going to ask you to help us make this one thing happen. I'm just a local business owner that volunteers to do this. Many of you in this room, if you give $10 tonight, you ate into your budget pretty heavily. And I'm in all of it. Some of you in this room tonight could give $100,000 and change the trajectory of what we do. My challenge is to give generously. And if you're thinking like beyond what you feel like is your limits, go home and pray about it. I'm not asking you for a specific thing. I just don't want you to miss out on what I've had the joy of experiencing and all the lives that have changed. Because that's why our team is 90% volunteer. They don't want to go away. They want to keep doing the work. I've not seen one yet that did. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight, and I'm going to ask Miss Diane to come up with a pretty cool closing piece. So thank you for being here tonight. God bless, and I hope to get to meet every one of you.
A lot of squishiness here tonight, so if I'm emotional, I apologize, because you hear so many of these stories, and I'm new to Chattanooga. They call it Calanuga, so I am one of the Californians that moved here. But I moved here from my family, and my sister, who is running the Renew program, my dad, who spent last night in the ER. I didn't know if I'd be able to be here today, but to see that all of you made this a priority and came today means the world to me. And this usually is my most anticipated part of the evening, where I learned as a young girl that taps was played on the battlefields, military bases, and sometimes even in my own home to signify the end of the evening when you lay to rest. And they play, a bugler at the end of every evening plays taps at Arlington National Cemetery, where my mama is laid to rest. And so that's why this is so meaningful to me. This is the end of our evening, and I do want to invite you. I want to thank you, first of all, for spending this impactful time by design. Everyone has said and mentioned how this is such a God-filled place, and what a joy that we get to do this in a church, and we can speak whatever we want and have the freedoms to say how we feel. So I just want you to know at the end of this, or an end of our program, that your time here tonight means a lot to all of us. And to hear one of these veterans say the things that didn't make the video, because maybe it was too emotional, but to hear one of these veterans say, I never thought I could be loved again. And that's really why we're all here, just to love one another. That's why I love what I do and the people I do it with, and each one of you that made an effort to do it with us tonight. So as we end the program this evening, I'd like to invite you afterwards to meet some of these really special dogs that are our Warrior Freedom Service dogs. And it is my honor now to introduce Echo Taps Buglers, David Cox, U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, and Andy Addison, who is U.S. Air Force retired. And for those that are able, we invite you to stand and end the evening by honoring our fallen heroes. Thank you so much.